Hello and welcome to Stampscaping 101. I was asked a question recently that's a really good question and one that I've been asked several times over the years, and that's what do you do first when approaching a scenic stamping composition? Do you do the imagery first or do you do the background first? And the answer to that is it just depends on what kind of look you're going after and what imagery you're using. I just did this really quick swatch right now using the glossy paper dye-based technique of layering different tones. And I've done the same, or I've used the same paper here with the dye-based inks, but just stamping out the imagery first, okay? Now if I've done a composition like this, or a background for a composition like this, this kind of little swatch lighting composition, you might call it, is going to dictate what the scene is going to kind of have a feel for, okay? I can't regain light areas so much with this, so let me show you what I'm getting at here. If I stamp out kind of more solid images like this, you know, they don't have too many open areas, like for example something like a chapel or something like this, where, you know, we have the little structure there with a little lit steeple area. I mean, it's not lit, it's just white. But if I have something like this and I stamp it over the top of this, okay, this image right here is not going to be light. It's going to be whatever color the paper is. Like, for example, it'll be, in this case, if I stamp it over here, it's going to be blue, right? Because I'm stamping it on what's essentially blue paper now. But if I stamp something like this, which is a solid image, you know, where I have just kind of mostly rocks in here, and I don't mind if they stamp darker, like, for example, whatever colors of swipes of blue that I laid down here, that would be fine. But if I want, let's say if I'm stamping out some kind of scene where I want my rocks to be a different color, let's say if I want them to be, you know, a reddish brown or something like that, and let's say the sky is going to be a blue sky, and in the water maybe some kind of aqua green or something like that, I would have to stamp that out first so that I can see where all the imagery is, where the water begins, and where the sky begins, okay? It wouldn't be easy to do kind of those swatched areas of tone, you know, without knowing exactly where the placement of the imagery is going to be. Okay, so let's just look through some different postcards here that we have, and I'll tell you whether or not I did the imagery first or the background first, okay? It kind of oscillates back and forth. I do them both ways. Okay, now a scene like this is with the tall rock with falls. In here we have kind of a monochromatic composition. Okay, now this one's done in pinks and purples for the most part, and we can see some areas in here that are lit. Okay, I wanted some clouds to kind of be, you know, meandering through the composition, but also I wanted the fall area to stand out, okay? So I have that little piece of the waterfall coming down up here. Now if I stamp that image right over the top of something like this, or, you know, even if it was done in those tones right there, that area in there, the waterfall, would be dark if I had swatches of color running, you know, in the background there. So therefore I stamp this one first. Now it doesn't mean that I if I do a background like this first and I stamp the imagery, I'm done, you know. You could be, but usually I go in and add more over the top of it. So it's not as if you're doing background and then foreground and then stopping, okay? Here's another scene using the snow-covered bridge as a focal point. Now, it's done in a real similar color scheme as this one, right? But if I did this background first and I stamped this bridge, covered bridge over the top of it, I'd have streaks of blue running right through the top of that rooftop there. So therefore, I would have had to do this one first, set the composition, and even though you do see these streaky little bits of blue in here, just like I done on here, I could work those streaks around the cabin, okay? And I wouldn't be running through the cabin, so I can kind of avoid that structure or subject matter. Okay, now this one right here, it's a little bit harder to tell what I did first. I don't remember. I think I did this in one of the lessons, but I didn't go back and check it out before I did this. But on this one here, you almost could do the imagery first and then color it in, or you can kind of do the background first and have kind of these streakier looks in here and then stamp everything out. Because while these trees would kind of be subject to showing streaks running right through them, the area in here isn't, the streaks didn't get so dark that would be kind of an obtrusive visual for the scene. So everything's kind of mellow, in other words, and I don't have like a lot of I don't have any different hue transitions. Okay, the trees are basically the same color as the entire atmosphere. So what these look like in terms of the monochromatic look here, they usually represent a certain time of day when colors typically are a little bit more muted and whatnot. Here's an example of streaks being laid down in here, but I have this moon that's nice and white, and I have some little bits and pieces of these clouds capturing that light. Now if I had streaks running through that cloud wouldn't necessarily be white like that unless I just happened to lay it down perfectly in a spot that retain that lightness here. So in this case right here, monochromatic look, but I've laid down the imagery first so I can work around certain areas. Usually I like to have some kind of light source and reflected light. And here's the reflected light down here in the water. So I've let these two little areas remain as close to the white of the paper to represent that, that reflected light. And same thing in the clouds. Usually I want to retain some little bits and pieces, even if the composition gets fairly dark. Falling water again, but larger imagery. This is the gushing falls and side falls large. If you want certain areas to remain nice and light, specific areas like this water, okay, you have to stamp it out first and work the colors around it, okay? Like I said, I usually like to retain lightness in my water, because in a scene with a waterfall, typically it's the focal point of the scene, and if you darken it in too much, it really recedes into the background and it doesn't stand out visually, okay? Now I've run some light blues up there because I don't want it stark white, but anyways, most of the dark tones, okay? Blues and greens up here for little mossy covered rocks. Those are the areas that move into the mid-tones and darker tones. Alright, changes in hue, okay? Warm tones below, basically cool tones above. I mean, I had that little pinkish salmon color as a warm hue, temperature, but you would certainly have to stamp this out first. And like these old rooftops here, I wanted it to, usually on structures, I want them to be top lit in some way, so I like to retain some of the lightness of it by just simply not going over them with dark midtones to darker tones. Therefore, I'd have to know where those that imagery is going to be positioned. So you have to stamp it out first and then put in the colors. In this case, I'm guessing what I did here was I stamped out the Palms Bungalows imagery and the Cloud Alto Cumulus sky up there. And then I probably added in these little foreground elements like these trees after I put the tones in there. Usually for little things like this, if they're in the foreground and I want them to stand out nice and stark black, or as dark as whatever color I'm using, I usually like to do that at the tail end. So it's imagery, background, foreground. Okay? Okay, again, real kind of monochromatic look like this. Now, this imagery could potentially start off like this. If I know I'm going to stamp out my moon in here and I don't mind some streaks of color going across in there like that. But I think I did probably stamp out the imagery first. I'm trying to remember if I did this one for a video, and I'm guessing I did. But oscillation of light and dark. Okay, light source, reflected light. I probably did. I'm guessing I stamped out the imagery first because I can see these shadow areas right here where it transitions up into a lighter area. So it goes dark, light. And it wouldn't be easy to do that if I didn't know where the imagery was. You could do a background like this, stamp out this type of imagery over the top of it, okay? And then go back in after you get that imagery laid out, and then add in the darker tones and shadow tones to really anchor that imagery down into the scene, okay? Sometimes when you do a background like this, and then you stamp out images over it, the imagery looks like it's kind of floating. So I like to anchor things down with the use of darker tones to give those objects visual weight and opacity, okay? Just by putting little shadows at the base of things. It's saying that light isn't just shining right through it. Okay. This is one of my favorite scenes right here. Okay. I think I did the background first, okay? You can see the difference here. This one right here, I've used kind of a different stroke, okay? And different colors too, but I've gone with more of a looping stroke like that, you know. And then I've gone back into it with white pigment ink. But this one right here, you know, this is using that same Lakeside Cove Large. And then I've layered in some other lighter colored trees in the background there, but monochromatic. I don't really mind colors getting in there. And it could really be done either way. But looking at this right here, I did this several years ago. I can't remember. Let me see if it says. It doesn't say when I did this, but I would do the background first, just because I know, you know, there's so much swiping of color that goes down. And I'm someone that doesn't like to wait. If I stamp out that imagery, I don't want it to, you know, to wait around for 5 or 10 minutes. I usually want to get in and just start coloring it right away. And with all that imagery stamped down there, chances are I wouldn't have to wait for too long, but just with all that streaking in there, you know, there is a slight chance that you would start to, you know, kind of soften some of that imagery up with so many strokes of color and wet ink going across it. So probably do the background first, stamp at the scene, and then add in a little bit of shadow detail for, again, visual weight and opacity. This one was done in the video lesson right here. Those branches right there, just solid black and solid in terms of the imagery itself. Certainly done at the end, okay? all those streaks in there. This one was really extreme because I've laid down a ton of color in ink and I've worked it all the way to black. And just waited till the end. A lot of times I like to wait till the end too with something like this to get a feel for what kind of background swatched area it looks like, because this is it's a real free-form application of ink, and you know, you kind of want to see what it's going to look like. You know, I might do 10 of these. I'm not doing it in mass production style where I'm doing one color, then, you know, the next color on 10 cards or something like that. But oftentimes, I mean, you can tell, I mean, when you're doing something like that and you lay down more of a certain color and less of another, and vice versa, these little background swatches of color come out quite different every time, which is a good thing, I think, for variation. But again, background first, and then the imagery. Real simple composition, one stamp. Okay, I bet you can guess what came first on this one. Definitely not something like this, because of so many transitions of light and dark. But not only that, it's hue, transitions of hue. We have blue, and then kind of the greenish fall tones, blue again, greenish fall tones. We would have to know where that pond is going to be in order to have it be, you know, a field of blue amongst all those green warm tones like that. So you'd have to stamp that first. And then I probably added in all the colors over everything, and then I probably did these foreground elements last. Okay. Another one with a transition of hue. By the way, this one right here isn't all Stampscape stamps. These are from, all these bugs and mushrooms are from a 100-proof press. But, okay. Imagery stamped first. Therefore, I knew where the grass in the composition would transition into the sky. It could have been all monochromatic. Yeah, chances are in moonlight, you're really not going to see colors like this, like green, but, you know, we're not just trying to replicate nature, you're stamping out your own world. And I wanted a variation in warmth down here in kind of warm brown tones and greens with that, you know, throughout the area. I thought it brought it to life and it extended the temperatures scale of the composition. But having that sky in there, the trees in this area, I've retained some of the lighter values in some of these trees by working around them with the blue. Okay, and certain areas down here, like the mushrooms, kind of capturing that moonlight. If I had existing swatches of color, I wouldn't be able to really know where those mushrooms were going to be placed. I can, you know, have a good idea of the composition, but not those kind of specific areas like where brown encounters or transitions into green like that. So you pretty much have to stamp it first if you want to go for that type of specific lighting direction, you might call it. Alright, this one right here, we have transitions of green moving up into kind of warm golden tones up here. You could do, you know, these swatches of color like this and go from greens down here, transitioning into kind of warm tones up here. For the most part, these images are fairly solid. That's the shagbark hickory, and then I have a lot of grass texture down here. But I've retained some of those areas of light down here. So I'm guessing I probably did the imagery first, and I've laid down a lot of tone, but then I've gone back into it and laid down more tones, more shadows and things like that. See, at the base of this tree right here, you can see at the base of these trees, where it gets darker. Here, here, you know, and here, over here. Okay, that's what I mean about adding shadows to something. So like I said, I could already have some swatches going down there, but as soon as you lay down your imagery, put down some shadows at the base of them like that and you can see where those trees, they're anchored into the scene a little bit more. Now, imagine that lightness if it was over here. It would just look like that tree is kind of floating in space. So even if I say I do background and then foreground, I'm doing more toning after that. Okay, transitions of hue once again, and definitely with this passage right here. Let's say this passage, this crooked path, is treated in a real similar fashion to, let's see, these waterfalls right here, okay? I like waterfalls to be kind of the focal point if it's going to be in a scene, therefore they're light, okay? Now, that's the same thing with passages like this, like trails. They create great visual lead-ins for the viewer's eye compositionally, so I'd like to keep them somewhat light, but just like the waterfall, okay, I don't want them just stark white. It looks kind of weird. So I've laid down some brownish tones around that, like that, to make it more of a kind of a dirt look. And, okay, I mean, you can imagine if I stamped out a bunch of tones in the background, we certainly wouldn't be able to really designate this structure here as being different in hue and value from the surrounding areas. In other words, if I had a bunch of streaks of green and brown like this in this scene, you know, I wouldn't be able to keep that rooftop nice and light, you know, little areas within the meadow, and that crooked path for sure wouldn't be, you know, it'd have streaks of color running through it, okay? So, that's an instance where I would do the imagery first and color it accordingly. Oh, just a side note, in this scene right here, you can see this little effect here in the corners. I did this kind of in a shadow box style where I placed my image, and this is a postcard, I put the scene in kind of an elongated shadow box frame, and like this is reindeer moss that you can pick up at a craft store or something like that, which kind of made it a, I don't know, kind of an interesting textural change. And I had to kind of, I think I did this years ago, but I think I had to bring my background a little bit darker in certain areas so that reindeer moss wouldn't stand out so much, and it would kind of, you know, blend in with the background a little bit more, but give it a slight kind of softer textural contrast to go with the scene. So I need to experiment with that more in the future, using three-dimensional objects, or you know, in landscape stamping there's so many like floral or plant types of things 3D that look really good in a composition in that kind of shadow stamping, shadow box style. So anyways, what comes first and what comes second in a scene just depends again on your ideas of your composition. I'm trying to think of some other questions. I would guess that for the most part, a faster scene to do would probably be the one where you're just kind of laying down some strokes like this and then stamping right over the top of it. Doing something like this is just kind of a varied idea. It's a variation of doing like what might be a brayered background, okay, where you have an area that's already designated with color. All right. That's not to say you can't stamp out something like this and brayer over the top of that, but, you know, just certainly cover up your moon. Or what a lot of people do is they have cutouts of, you know, round punches or something like that, and they place it down and they just brayer over the top of it and peel that little mask off, and voila, they have a full moon or something like that. But you know, the brayering and the bold application of solid areas of, I guess it's not solid, but transitions of colors. Like I said, it gives it a certain mood, and I don't know, usually represents, you know, kind of a specific time of day that wouldn't be like, say, high noon. It would probably be something more of like a nighttime type of scene, or a sunrise, sunset, twilight, you know, dusk dawn. And that's what those things tend to look like, you know, when you have kind of existing swatched backgrounds, okay? Something like that. Whereas if you have something like this, it probably represents something during the daytime where you can see those colors and color transitions. Of course, I do have this. This one's daytime too, but it's real monochromatic, but I've added in some slight touches of green in there. Okay. Anyways, I hope that answers the question that you might have in terms of process. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave us a comment. And as always, thanks for watching the video.